And welcome everybody to God's Views on Political News. It's so great to have you here with us today. Bill, I see it's a hat day.
It's an old hat day.
It's an old hat day.
It's frayed and torn up, but that's the way I like them.
It'll get you by. You know, what can I say? Well, I'm coming to you today, I should say, from the People's Republic of California. I am self-isolating. I am, in my bunker. And I don't think in California we're going to see the light of day, just to be honest with you, because our governor has us on lockdown.
Well, we have a few stipulations here, but we're still in the free America zone. So
yeah, well, good for you.
Just want to let you know. Yeah.
Did you notice a little sarcasm there?
I picked up on that just a tad. Yeah, well, I was trying to be sarcastic with you, so we've been telling some of our friends over in California the day was going to come that they're not going to let you out. So anyway.
I know, and that day is here. It is absolutely here. Yeah, our governor came on yesterday, and we'll talk more about that. But it doesn't look like we're going to do anything different. Maybe close this down even more. I don't know, but. Like I said, we'll talk about that again in a minute, but I do want to talk about what's going on right now in Congress. And when I say that, I'm really talking about what the Democrats are doing in Congress right now. And Nancy Pelosi, who I'm going to try to bite my tongue like I didn't do this morning, but Nancy Pelosi gets on a plane in the epicenter, in California, where she lives, right? In San Francisco, this is where coronavirus is mostly, gets on a plane, flies to Washington, D.C., when she wasn't needed there because she's not in the Senate last time I checked, and tries to, she did. Let's just say this. All these people that were in the Senate that were working hard, that it looked like there was going to be an agreement, had worked all weekend. She flies in and everything just falls apart. Yeah. And she has a laundry list of things that she wants.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the polite way to put it. It would seem that she has Chuck under her spell. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
She seems to be leading him around a little bit. So.
She seems to be leading him around a lot. Now, I want to say hello to Gillian and Robin that have joined us and other people that are coming in. And
wait. Did you just say Gilligan?
No, Gillian.
Oh, okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure. All right.
You thought I lost it there, didn't you?
Yeah, I did for just a moment. You're getting stir crazy. You're watching too many reruns of Gilligan's Island. So.
Yeah, I know. It seems that way, but so. If Brandon has this up here, let's kind of start out sort of seeing what's going on. And this was as of yesterday. So things, they haven't really changed all that much. I want to talk about, this is a tweet from Donald Trump Jr., if we can bring that up. He said, it's shameful what happened to the party that used to represent working Americans. And that is true. Under Kennedy, that was kind of a party that did that with the Democrat Party. This is not your grandparents' Democrat Party anymore. This is the crap they're willing to tank the economy for, and GTFO. And you can figure out what that means.
Well, let's not try to figure it out.
But let's roll the video. This is from Senator John Kennedy. And I love this. This says it all. So Brandon has that.
Why are Democrats filibustering the bipartisan?
You know what the American people are thinking right now? They're thinking that the brain is an amazing organ. It starts working in a mother's womb, and it doesn't stop working until you get elected to Congress. You know what the American people are thinking right now, Mr. President? They're thinking that this country was founded by geniuses, but is being run by a bunch of idiots. You know what the American people are thinking right now, Mr. President? They're thinking, why do the members of the United States Senate continue to double down on stupid? Now, this is not a Republican bill, Mr. Chairman.
You know, I'm not going to argue. That is what a lot of us are thinking. Yeah, and I'm not sure if the senator is aware of this, but a lot of us have been thinking that.
Yeah. Now, I lost a bill there, so I guess that went down. So while other people are coming in, hello, Linda, hello, Marnie, Teresa, good to see you, Paul and Lori, and Lorraine. So Bill's trying to get on his battery went dead again, so he'll be right back. He'll be talking to us soon. We had this last week. Nobody changed the batteries on.
He said he did. So
yeah, well,
anyway, so I'm going to wear my helicopter gear here for just a moment.
That's good. We'll fly out of here.
Yeah. All I was saying is that, you know, a lot of people have been thinking what the senator expressed for a long time now. He just finally somebody, you know, admitted it on the floor of the Senate. So yeah,
Absolutely.
And it's either that or they're just diabolical, you know, and I'm not sure which. Either one is not good for most people.
Well, let's just say this, you know, thank God we have somebody other than President Trump who's been amazing, by the way, and has handled this better than anybody that I could ever imagine. But thank God that we have somebody better than President Trump who's stepped up to help us. Why don't we go ahead and let's roll that next tweet, Brandon.
Hold on, he can't hear you because he was trying to get my mic up. Put up the next tweet that she had.
From Joe.
From Joe Biden?
Yes.
Or the video or a tweet?
Let's do the video on Joe Biden.
All right, do the video from Joe Biden. Okay.
So again, thank goodness we have somebody of sound mind to run this country. You know, let's see what Joe can
activate the reserve corps of doctors and nurses and beef up the number of responders dealing with these crush of cases. And in addition to that, we have to make sure that we are in a.
Well, now let me say something here.
Okay.
I have been in that position before.
You've never been in that position.
No,
before.
I have been. I've been in the position.
Not 5,000 times a day.
No,
okay?
no. I've been in the position before that, you know, all of a sudden you're getting this talking and, you know, and all of a sudden things go wrong. But you're right. I don't do it multiple times a day. True. And I'm not running for president.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he is either. He said senator, but I think one of the things people are saying that he might have been doing with the little hand motion that was going on below the screen. I think the teleprompter went down, quite possibly.
Yeah,
and
that's what I heard.
He's like, "What do I say now? I got nothing else. Can't think on my own on this." So, I think he should just not do what he's not capable of doing and let the president of the United States handle the crisis because he's doing a great job.
Well, number one, we don't need two presidents right now. We don't have two presidents right now. And as far as him not doing what he's not capable of doing, I think that includes being the president. So, you know, and not to pile on Joe Biden, but it seems that, you know, with every passing day, this gets worse and worse and worse. And I'm telling you, I've said this 100 times already, and I'll say it again. God has used Donald Trump to be to the progressives and the leftists and the Marxists and the socialists and all those ists. He has used him to be to them what Jerusalem is to the nations, a stone of stumbling, a cup of trembling. I mean, in the most literal sense now.
Yeah.
You know, it's becoming, I think, well, I know, it's becoming very obvious to people who are not Trump people that their guys are nuts.
Yeah,
that their guys are losing it. And it's just every passing day, there's more and more evidence of it.
Well, you know, especially when you're out in California, life is getting very surreal. I mean, it really is. It's almost like you're looking at it going, okay, is this reality or is this crazy time? Because it's combining and becoming very close together now. And when you see Joe and when he does that and he doesn't know where he's at, he doesn't know what state and all that, you're thinking, am I the only one that sees this?
No.
You know, and it's like anybody else, if this were a Republican, people would say, for the love of God, get him off of the stage because he's embarrassing himself. But it's obvious they're continuing to use him and they don't care that he's being used. I care that he's being used. I think that's disgraceful for anybody to do that. But it tells you, it screams even loudly, even more loudly, how the Democrats, the liberal Democrats, the ones out of control, view the world and what they want to do. It's like Joe is helping them push their agenda. And as soon if they could get him elected, they would replace him. He would just be a puppet like he is now, with people moving back into the White House.
The Manchurian candidate?
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. That's Manchuria's in China. I shouldn't say that.
Shouldn't say that because it's, can't talk about anything from China right now. So, but, speaking about like surreal, I have a list. You can't really see it too well, but this is a list of what Nancy Pelosi was originally asking for. I don't know if this is going to end up like this or whatever.
It better not.
It better not. But because I think, it'll be time for me to try to either walk to Washington, D.C. or try to fly there or however else I can get there. But listen to some of these. I won't read them all. $300 million for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, because, they're critical in this time in coronavirus. $500 million for the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Again, you got to look up the definition of coronavirus, so you need to give them money, right? And also, by the way, Nancy borrows paintings from the museum there in San Francisco, and she hasn't returned them yet. But I think after Michael Savage reported it, it did get back to the museum. We can check that out later. $300 million for migration and refugee assistance. $23 million for Howard University, because I don't know, maybe they'll have a class on coronavirus. And then let me get to some of the other things. Expansion of wind and solar tax credits. Conducting risk limiting audits of results of elections. Coronavirus elections, right? Is that something? Is that a thing? I don't know. Requires early and online voting, requires same-day voter registration, prohibits voter ID requirements. And for all of you who live outside of California, because we are already blessed with this, but she wants to legalize ballot harvesting nationwide. And you can't require witness signature or other methods of ensuring a secure chain of custody. Now, I'm being sarcastic for those of you who don't know me, but just reading that list makes me want to go throw up.
Well, what was it Clyburn said? And by the way, that's probably your connection to the Howard University thing. But
yes,
most likely. But what was it? And I don't have the exact quote in front of me. But
he said this is a great time for our restructuring things the way we want them.
Yeah, to give us this is a great opportunity to get us to fix things the way we want them. Yeah. So never let a crisis go to waste, right? So they're going to try it. I hope that Senator Kennedy from Louisiana is not alone, and that the people who still have some semblance of common sense fight this tooth and nail. I think I saw the president tweet that he's not going to sign it, and of course they'll try to pin that, the Americans are suffering because he vetoed this, whatever.
He wouldn't sign it. Yeah.
So it's I'm choosing to believe that all of this is once again going to kind of push to the forefront for everybody to see, including Democrats, just what the leaders of your party are trying to do. In fact, I read this one tweet from this lady. She was a hardcore Democrat. She went to a Trump rally. She came out of that with a completely different perspective of people who support Trump. And even she's saying, I'm not voting for these idiots, talking about the Democrats, and she was a staunch Democrat. So I'm hopeful that Haman's building his own gallows is what I'm hopeful of here. It's a shame that they would use people, as fodder, but it is what it is.
And that's exactly what they're doing. I mean, because this woman I'll try to say that without saying something else I want to say, because this woman is so selfish and so concerned about her own power, her own control, her own glory. She is ignoring people, small businesses, and people who need this money. Californians need this money because our governor has shut this state down. New York needs this money if nobody else does. People are out of work. Small businesses, some of them, they're gone. They're not just went away. They're gone. They're not coming back.
Well, it's not just California and New York. It's not just the hot spots. You know, it's all over the country.
It's the nation.
Right. And, you know, on one hand, I hate, you know, the government getting involved with, you know, things like this. But at the same time, you know, the government is the one who's saying we need to either shelter in place or lock down or no more meetings at more than 10, and it's just one of those very, very tragic things that government gets involved, and people have a tendency to want to look to government to fix everything. I hate that, but at the same time, you know, if they can give these what I understand to be no interest, you know, loans, not really a handout, but no interest loans. That's my understanding of it anyway. And keep some of these businesses afloat until this craziness subsides, then, you know, it is what it is. I mean, right here in little Cleveland, Tennessee, you know, just Monday, the Governor Bill Lee, signed an executive order to prohibit meetings over 10 people. So that's going to kind of, you know, put us in a strange place for a little while as a congregation. You know, dining rooms are pretty much shut down as far as restaurants go. You know, life is different right now for everybody. And, you know, we've got some folks that we know that run different restaurants. A guy told me just yesterday, he said, it's me and my partner, and we're here doing everything we can just to try to stay open, because I feel like if we close, we're not going to reopen. You know, it's that kind of a thing. And so that's tragic, and that there are people in this world, and, you know, Miss Pelosi, I'll use this word, Jezebel, because that's what it is. You know, it is this manipulative, coercive, controlling mindset, spirit. By the way, it doesn't just have to be a woman; it can be a man too. But it is a spirit that wants to control and has selfish motive. So I don't mind whatsoever calling her, you know, someone who operates in that spirit. And, you know, Hillary's kind of in the, you know, the background right now, but, you know, she walked around and working in that spirit too. So it is a spirit that is really trying to put the chokehold on, I think, more than the economy. I think it goes well beyond that. That's just a tool to try to bring down this administration, to try to turn the tables in November. But the fact that she's put all these other items in this bill tells you what they have in mind. It is complete and utter control over your life.
Yeah. It's the Green New Deal, it's climate change, it's 2030 agenda, it's Agenda 21, it's everything rolled up into one. It's like, let's just put it all down here. Let's get it all, because we won't have a better time. And somebody made a point, I've seen it going around the internet, saying, look, they impeached President Trump for delaying aid to Ukraine. And then you have Nancy, who's doing the exact same thing.
Interesting.
And I, you know, I prayed on an earlier show today for Psalm 143:12, and that is that if it's God's will, that he would remove her from Congress. And whether that's voting her out, you know, whatever God's will is, I don't wish her any ill will. I just want her gone from Congress. And so I prayed, if that's his will too, that would happen. Sorry, but I just, you know.
Well, I will not pretend to know what God's purpose in all of this is. I mean, I don't think that God orchestrated this virus. I don't think that he threw it at mankind, you know, like, take that. I don't think that. But I also, at the same time, believe that God speaks through these kinds of things when he allows the consequence of our choices to touch us and to affect our lives, whether it's God's people or not. And so all of that is to say that if it is another way that the true intent and heart of the Schumers and the Pelosi's and the Clintons and all of the different people, and this might also, be applied to some of the Republicans as well. If that's being exposed, then that's the hand of God, I believe, in all of this. And that, by the way, and I don't want to get off on this topic too much, but that goes for you and me too. Where our hearts are, what's in our hearts. Are we fearful? Are we this? Are we that? So anyway, back to Pelosi and all these people. If she is going to double down in this tyrannical, oppressive mindset and try to impose these things on people, it does not end well for Jezebel. That's just the way it is. It does not end well.
When you're talking about Haman's news and building that platform, my thoughts are, how high does that have to go before these people fall? You know what I mean?
Well, that's the thing. God's timing's not ours.
Exactly.
I mean, we want it now. We want it fixed right now, today, yesterday, in fact. But God is a lot more long-suffering and merciful and forgiving than we are. As far as the Bible goes, the man who lived the longest, Methuselah, he died the year of the flood. In fact, there's some beliefs that he died the very week before the flood started. What's the point? If he's the person who lived longer than anybody else, that speaks to the fact that God is long-suffering. He's not willing that any should perish. And he gives people opportunity to turn from those things. However, on the other side of that, and this is recorded in the book of Revelation, since we're talking about Jezebel, he says, you know what? I gave her a space of time to repent. She didn't repent, and I threw her into a sick bed. And so I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Those that would exploit the suffering of others to advance their own purposes. Is this a time that we're going to see those who work in that mindset and spirit? Are they going to be thrown into a sick bed? It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Now, Brenda Liz says people are waking up to the fact for sure she will be voted out. I know Dems who are really upset with all this. Let's hope so, because it is California. And if this were Tennessee or if this were North Carolina, some other place, I would have more faith in the fact that she would be voted out. And I'm hoping that Californians are waking up. But I'll tell you, some of the same Californians are going out and, going to the beaches and going to the parks and things like that when we're on, not supposed to be with each other. So those same people, unfortunately, go out and vote. So I don't know what they're going to do. Jonathan said it's a man-made virus to control the population. Now, Robert Losi said, there have been empires and kingdoms in the past that used the tactic of letting the bodies pile up until they breached the defenses and ascended to the throne room.
Interesting.
So, and let's see, Paul said, and that patterns in history repeat themselves. So there's so much going on. I don't think any of us have a total grasp on, all that's really going on, because there's so much. Now, Teresa said this has put us in a place to trust God rather than man or ourselves. And I know that it has me, and it's also put me in a place of introspection of myself, and of what I'm doing, what I could do better, what I didn't do right, what I did contribute to any of this.
Well, and that's kind of what I was alluding to just a moment ago.
Yeah.
It's not only to expose the hearts of those that we perceive and believe to be wicked and evil and greedy and power hungry, but it also exposes what's in our heart. And where God's people are concerned, Teresa, I think it was the name you called, whether or not we are fearful of these things more so than we are fearful of God. If these are the things that we're obsessing over, and I'm not saying that it's not human to be, concerned about things that are going on. I mean, I'm concerned. I still hold the position that I'm not nearly as afraid of the virus as I am the people who are panicking. I mean, that's what scares me the worst, and how we're responding to this. And I say that not as someone who has directly had to deal with this virus. I don't want it. I don't want anybody I know to get it. I don't want my family to be touched by it. But I guess it's the response to it that is, at least right now, more troublesome to me. And that is what God's people do not need to give into, the panic, the fear. Should we respond? Should we take measures to be prudent, to be wise in a time like this? Absolutely. Are we going to think that we can just tempt God? We can walk right into this, virus and not be affected? We're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to be cautious. We're supposed to be people who are wise and yet not intimidated by it and not relegated to, drawing up into a fetal position in the corner, afraid to move. No, we can't do that as God's people. So all that is to say that your introspection, my introspection, looking inside, searching our hearts, doing a little soul searching on our own, that's a good thing. And when we find that there are things there that are not biblical, that don't line up with the Father's will and His Word, then we need to do something about that. And then we need to deal with that, because He will use that to kind of bring us to that point. And that is a good thing.
And some people are saying too, and I've kind of this belief as well. One of the things that, 2 Chronicles 7 comes to mind about, if my people will humble themselves and turn back to me in essence. And I think that this gives us that opportunity, as Christians for those people who have strayed away from God or who don't focus on God, to give us that opportunity to come back, to repent, and through all of this time, and then do what I feel that we're supposed to be doing here. And that is, at this time especially, bringing others to Christ. So it's so many things are happening at once.
Well, and we can't do that if they're looking at us and we're freaking out.
Exactly.
They're just like me, they're freaking out.
Right.
So we can't, that should not be our testimony. In Proverbs, there is an admonition that in the day of adversity, we are not to faint. We're not to be overwhelmed by this. It doesn't mean it doesn't affect us. It doesn't mean we don't have to respond to it. It just means that we're not to faint in the day of adversity. We're His people because our confidence and trust should be in Him in spite of what's going on around us. And if I may add this one other thought, and I'll turn it back over to you. This past Saturday in our service, I read a passage from Haggai chapter 2, and basically the situation is this. The Jews have returned from Babylon, their country's destroyed, everything that they built had been leveled, the temple's destroyed, and they're looking at it, and God says, hey, how many of you are old enough to remember what things used to be like when everything was great? And now look at it. He says, but guess what? I'm still with you. And I'm going to be with you just like I was when I brought your forefathers up out of the land of Egypt and all the miracles that I performed for them. Here's what I want you to do. Work. Do the work. Start rebuilding this thing. Don't faint. I've got all the silver. I've got all the gold you need to make this happen. You just work and I will be with you. And that resonated within me, that as God's people in this day and time, that, there's devastation economically, this, that, and the other. People are afraid of their own shadow. But he says to His people that I'm still with you here. You do what you're supposed to do. You do the work that God's people are supposed to be doing, especially in a time like this, and I'll be with you. So I think that's very important for us to remember at a time like this.
Now, Brenda Liz said, these are the times to be who we are called to be, the light. Instead of bringing fear, bring hope. It's simple. Linda Smith said, turn from their wicked ways, written to us and for us. Elizabeth said, God is calling believers and non-believers to come to Him, calling. And she said, last call, ? Jonathan said, we are not functioning in God's purpose. Thomas Kincaid said, I received a video a bit ago, a prayer for President Trump. As we were praying, I saw a swirling and reminded me of very hard shaking. Reminded me of a whirlwind. So my prayer was to create a whirlwind in the chamber of our enemies, papers flying everywhere, people caught up in it, a very hard shaking of their being. Also sensed a striking of feet against a stone. So, a lot of things are, people are seeing and feeling. I think that Christians are feeling things like they never felt before. They're seeing things, they're witnessing things. I have done that myself recently. So I know that, God is speaking to us. It's whether or not we're going to listen is the problem.
Well, think back, those of you who remember where you were the morning you woke up at 9/11 and turned on the television, turned on the news, and the impact that made, and you're trying to figure out what's going on and trying to wrap your brain around all of this, and how overnight, or just in a few moments or a few hours, our lives changed. Have not been the same since then. We've gotten to a new normal, I guess you'd say, but it's never going to be like it was before. And so, in a way, this whole thing kind of brings back that sense of things are going to be different now. And we don't know what that's going to look like just yet, but you have this sense that things are changing, things aren't going to be the way they used to be, and we're going to have to adjust. The immediate crisis may kind of wash through, but there'll be something else later on. So all of that is to say that people are sensing things because they realize that God is moving in all of this. I'm not saying He threw this virus at us. I'm not saying He put this on mankind. I think this is a consequence of man's choices and actions. But nonetheless, God's people are sensing that behind the scenes, He's working, He's speaking, He's orchestrating. And I think, what was the word that someone used just a moment ago? He's calling us. He's calling us to draw even closer to Him.
Now, Sylvia says, the church has left the building. What are we going to do? Go into a panic and fear? Or are we going to trust God and tell others about God and His love for us? Give them peace and hope. And Linda said also read the book of Hebrews too. And again, we are here for a reason. And it's like you said, God is allowing this, and God allows things to happen sometimes for His reasons, His purpose, not ours. And we just have to, not fall apart at such a time. And I know for a long time people have said, get out of California. And, there are days when I'm thinking about it seriously. But at the same time, it's like there has to be a light in California. Like there's a light across the nation.
Yeah, I say that to you all the time, kind of tongue in cheek, but not entirely.
Not really.
Not entirely teasing you. But it's true that, we need to bloom where we're planted, because, I think of Daniel. Daniel was, as far as we know, was a righteous man, but where did God have him? He had him right there in Babylon. The three Hebrews that were with him there, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that was their Babylonian names. They didn't want to be in Babylon. They didn't want to be in captivity, but that's where God put them. And because they were there were powerful men who came to realize that the God of Israel is God. So it is true, you have to bloom where you're planted. And sometimes that's in the middle of the chaos. Sometimes that is in the belly of the beast. What about these men and women that are every day going into the belly of the beast when they go to work at the hospitals and these clinics and things like that, and people are coming in and people are scared and they're sick, contagious,
and God bless us.
Right.
That's why we're talking about it.
Right.
For sure.
And I'm sure that they would like to be in lockdown.
Yes.
and not having to go out there and face all this stuff, but they go. Some of them go scared, but they go and they do what they're supposed to do. So, if it's that way, in the medical field, and it should be much more so that way where God's people are concerned as it relates to the darkness that's in this world today. They do need to see peace and calm and confidence, not in ourselves, and not that any of this won't touch us, but that is who we choose and what we choose to focus on in spite of the fact that all these things are going on.
And Brenda Liz says, birth pains. I believe we are in that part where Yeshua says we will see signs, but the end is not yet. Jonathan said the house of Judah has the Torah, but not the Messiah. The house of Israel has the Messiah, but not the Torah. Sorry.
Well, that's another discussion for another day. Yeah.
Yeah. So Another thing, a lot of people seem to be in Congress, the Democrats in Congress, and so far it's just been the Democrats in Congress, are taking advantage and trying to get other things. For example, all along we've heard with Elizabeth Warren, all she did was talk about, I want to wipe out the whole debt, give everybody free education, wipe out the whole debt for those people who have student loans, and on and on. And of course, that socialistic viewpoint didn't get her anywhere. But then we have Ayanna Presley and Ilhan Omar, who have come up with their own proposal. It's a legislation called the Student Debt Emergency Relief Act. And they propose a cancellation of at least $30,000 in outstanding debt, tax-free, and proposes that the Education Department immediately assume responsibility for the monthly payments of borrowers who hold federal loans, while suspending involuntary collection of or garnishments of wages or federal income tax returns amid the crisis. Once again, we can see how they are using the crisis to do what they want to do, which is get rid of debt and for the student loans. They
want to relieve these students of their debt while they're in school, living in a dorm, or back at their mom and dad's house now, probably eating their food, burning their lights. Yeah, they're the ones that need some relief here. I'm sorry if I don't sympathize with that right now.
Well, and here's what I want to say, and I've seen other people talking about this. I think until all of the stimulus package is done, until all the work is done, perhaps Congress should not be paid. There are people out there, small businesses, and everybody else suffering. Congress should be suffering right along with the rest of us.
What was her name, McSally from Arizona? Didn't she say she was going to introduce something to that effect?
I don't know. I hope so.
I heard
that would be great.
I think I heard that this morning. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're sitting there, and they're at the least they're making $174,000 a year, and those small businesses were probably, some of them maybe doing that well, and now they're gone. Tim said, "It is my fervent hope that tens of millions of evangelicals no longer sit home on election day." Yes, and then David said, "Just stay in your ark." So, I don't have one, but if I did,
as much as it's raining here, we're going to have to get one. We're getting another 2 inches of rain today, it seems.
And we've had rain here over the last couple of days. The sun is shining now. And I would tell anybody, and unless you have an aversion to the sun for some medical reason or whatever, if the sun comes out, when it does, get out there in it and get your vitamin D and stay healthy and, keep the immune system going. I think that's what we need to do. Now, we had a couple of more tweets on this, and I think I'm going to just skip those because basically it's just talking about Nancy Pelosi and her 1,400 page document. So it kind of all goes around. So I just kind of want to move on and go to another topic and say, Bill, here's the thing, and we've kind of been alluding to it. I'm really concerned about the Constitution and the loss of our republic through all of this. What do you tell people when people say, yes, but, we haven't, people are dying. We can't just open up the country. We can't do this and that. What do you say about that to people?
To the folks that want to close everything down? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There are places in the country that probably need to be, everybody just stay at home for a few days and let's let this thing kind of wash through, but not all over the country. In California, there are probably neighborhoods in Los Angeles or districts in Southern California that may need this to happen, or in San Francisco or in New York City, and other highly populated areas that it might merit something like that for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. But to do it just across the state of California, I think is ridiculous. Or for that matter, to do it across the state of New York. There's a lot of New York that is country. It's not, crammed up in apartment complexes and steel and concrete. And so to put everybody in that situation and to undermine everyone's life just because there's a hot spot over here, I just don't think it makes any sense. It doesn't to me. I'm not I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. I won't pretend to know just how these things work, other than I know that if you come in contact with somebody who's sick and you give them a kiss or wipe their germs all over you, you're probably going to get sick too. But I also know that, the community that we live in right now, there's probably 40, 50,000 people. There's 2 or 3 known cases that have tested positive. And I just personally think that it's a little bit overboard to shut absolutely everything down, just use some common sense. That's my feelings on it. And I know there are people who vehemently disagree with that.
Yeah.
And that's fine. You can disagree with it. To me, there is a fine line, it seems these days, between being wise and cautious and being panic driven. Mm-hmm. And so the analogy that came to me that I've shared with people is, you take a match, and the match by itself is not some overwhelming power and influence in and of itself, but when it's put to wood, hay, and stubble, and then the winds of panic and fear whip up, it really doesn't matter that it was a match that started it. What matters now is there's a wildfire raging and threatening everybody, and now you've got to respond to it. And so to me, that seems to be what has happened. I'm not diminishing the fact that this virus is deadly. People have suffered from it. People have died from it. I understand that. I get that. But it seems to me that there are people who are using this and feeding the panic. It is in their best interest to feed the panic, to whip it up, and to use fear, just like this thing with Pelosi and this bill, to use fear of the loss of your 401k, the loss of your job, the loss of your life to advance what they want. And that is what I feel like we need to be very, very careful not to give into, very diligent to stand against. And we're going to have to keep our head in this. So anyway, I may have rambled off topic just a little bit, but that's kind of where I'm at with all of this. All right, the governor of Tennessee said, I don't want anybody to meet in places over 10 people. We're going to respect that. We're going to respect that because he's a leader that God has put in position. The mayor of our city said the same thing. Okay, out of respect to our leadership and with the understanding that this is supposed to be temporary, 2 weeks here, we are going to respect that. But at some point, you have to start looking at, there has to be some balance to this. It's, cancer patients are faced with choices. Do you want to get chemo and radiation? And some cancer patients think, what's worse, the treatment or the disease? And people have to make those choices. And I think the same is true here. We have to be given opportunity to make those choices. Let me say one other thing. Your governor, I heard it yesterday or last night, they're going to start closing down your beaches and all those kinds of things. And I understand that in the name of public health, you want to try to do the best we can to keep this thing from spreading. I get that. I'm good with that. But he said something that just really hit me right between the eyes. He says, we need to help people help themselves.
Yeah, scary.
Yeah, that's the scary part in all this. That government has the mindset of that we're going to help you help yourself. And when the words like that are coming out of the mouth of Gavin Newsom or the Nancy Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumers and the Mario Cuomo's, and that's a scary thing to me.
Well, and I kind of look at this too, like how we approach this problem. It was kind of like Obamacare. We had a small segment of the population that everybody felt needed to have insurance that didn't have it. Instead of focusing on that small percentage of the population, we changed the entire thing for the entire nation, and now everybody's insurance is screwed up beyond repair until we get something decent. I think we handled this the same way. we looked at a couple of hotspots, and it's, now people want to close down the nation. They want to, and they're doing it state by state. They really are closing down the nation state by state.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry I interrupted, but here in Tennessee, the governor, he signed an executive order that prohibited public meetings over 10, the dining rooms and all the gyms and all that kind of stuff. A lot, like a lot of these other places have done. But there was a group of lawmakers from Middle Tennessee, which, in other words, equals the liberals in Tennessee. In Middle Tennessee, along with some doctors, are trying to pressure the governor to shut the whole state down, just like everyone else, even though Davidson County, Nashville, and that general area is really the hot spot in Tennessee. Yeah. There's, some counties in Tennessee have no confirmed cases. Some have 1, some have 2, some have 3. And it would be counterproductive, I think, anyway, to shut down the whole state. But there's these people that it seems that they're using the fear and the panic to whip it up, to shut things down, upset the stability in those states. And I can't help but think to exploit that to advance something else. So like 911, what's one of the things that we have now that we didn't before 911? TSA. For someone who has traveled a lot and flown a lot, TSA is one of the bad things, as far as I'm concerned, that came out of 911, because the government got involved in those kinds of things. And when the government starts taking over these things, a little piece here, a little piece there, it usually doesn't turn out good for the, Joe average. And Bernie Sanders was just saying the other day that, if some of these businesses are giving what he called bailouts, my understanding is no interest loans, that he feels that the government needs to be in charge of these industries and these businesses. What did de Blasio say?
Communist,
yeah. Yeah, de Blasio wants it to be, everything that's kind of privatized now, he wants it to be publicly owned or publicly controlled.
Nationalized.
Right. So that is socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it, it ends up being totalitarianism. And so while I am respectful of the fact that I do believe that there are people in public service that are trying to serve the public, I do.
Right.
I do believe that. And, for our mayor, for instance, I think that he's a believer. I think he's got the best interests of people in mind. And so out of respect to the fact he's asked us to do certain things or not do certain things, I'm going to do that. I'm going to respect that. But on the large, looking at it from a bigger perspective, there are people, there's no doubt in my mind, that are trying to exploit this. And so we need to be aware of that. And we don't need to give in to the panic. We don't need to give in to the fear. We need to keep our heads about this. And we need to keep our eyes where they're supposed to be. That is the author and the finish of our faith as we navigate these uncharted waters.
Now, Katie says New Mexico is limited to 5 starting today. Governor says we have signed a social contract. And those words are scary. Now, I want to say too, President Trump is trying to get that balance. He was talking about it yesterday, saying, look, we've got to get the companies and the businesses back up. We cannot shut down this nation for any length of time, because we will go into a depression economically. And even if you save everybody in the process, which I hope we could, I really do wish we could save everybody. I really do. Chances are that's not going to happen. But even if you close down the country and you save everybody, when you open it back up and you have nothing economically, guess what's going to happen?
People are going to die. Yeah.
People are going to die. And so you have to keep your heads about you, like you're saying. You really have to be rational and have a balance. Now, I wanted to say about New York, and this is what the problem is. In New York, those young people that have been chastised for not being careful and mindful of the elderly and et cetera during the coronavirus, turns out that ages 18 through 44 make up the plurality of cases in New York City, with 5,704 or 46% of all coronavirus patients. Yet that age group makes up only 40% of the city's population. Now, the smallest, that's a lot of people. All the young people, 18 to 44, are 46% of the coronavirus cases. And the smallest group is actually adults 75 and older, who are making up 8% of the cases. So the older adults are isolating themselves, self-isolating, and the adults under 50 are making up 58% of all the cases in New York City. That means that the people who are being, like New York City and California, who are being told to shelter in place, they're not doing that. They're giving it to other people, you know? So if we're going to do this, my thing is, if this is what's going to save everybody, and this is what we're supposed to do for 2 weeks, then let's do it. If this isn't the answer, then let's just open things up and get back to work, because we're not doing it this way.
Well, you know, again, we're going to have to do this thing in a balanced manner, you know? And so if the governor of California is going to make you shelter in place, is that what they call it?
Yeah. Well, stay at home.
Stay at home.
I know it's the same thing as shelter in place is what it is.
Then yeah, everybody should, you know, let's do this. I mean, all right, let's just take them at their word. If we do this, the quicker we do this, the quicker this thing gets over. All right, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to respect our leaders and say, okay, we're going to do our part. We're not going to be the weak link here, you know. And you know, the young people, you know, hopefully will abide by that. If enough of them get sick, you know, and get knocked on their butt, they might. But at the same time, you know, just because that's happening in New York City doesn't mean it's happening in Southeast Tennessee. And so, why does everybody have to, you know, be subject to the bad behavior of a few? You know, anyway.
Because that is socialism.
Right. That is, we want to control your lives.
That we want to control. And here's some things too. A coalition of gun rights activists on Monday filed a lawsuit against New Jersey and the governor there because for closing gun stores and suspending background checks amid the coronavirus pandemic. And that's happening also in Washington State. Washington, D.C., I should say, not Washington State. And so we're talking about some things that are happening that we're not recognizing them for what they are because we're busy focused on staying alive, we know, which is it's not unusual for us to do that, but that's happening. Some other things are happening where, again, we talked about this. Cuomo wants to have everything nationalized. Now, we do have a tweet from Ben Shapiro that, Brandon, if you could put up tweet number 4. And he said, using the greatest financial lockdown in the history of the world in order to give businesses the choice between going belly up or taking government loans that require those businesses to be essentially government run is a pretty audacious move, even for Democrats. We've got that. We're looking at getting rid of the Constitution, breaking apart the Republic, and doing that. In California, in San Diego County, there's a city, Chula Vista. And this just came out last night that the police department are going to start using drones that fly over, you know, ones that
like they did in China.
Like they did. Well, these came from China too, by the way. And they're going to, because they want to monitor everybody to make sure that they're, you know, staying in home. And they also don't want to come near the criminals because they might get infected. That's a Fourth Amendment right and the Constitution that we're talking about. That's, in my opinion, being violated.
And that's why you have the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I better not say what I'm thinking right now.
I know. Well, there's a lot of things.
All I'm going to say, the drone might not come back.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we're talking about all of this, though, I mean, this is serious stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is serious stuff. And you're talking about putting things in place that once this is over may not ever go away.
TSA.
Yeah, and Brenda Liz said shelter in place is the last step before martial law. And, you know, it typically is what it is. And we're talking about, while, you know, the president is talking about trying to get the nation back up and running, California, on the other hand, see, I don't think it's going to be 2 weeks here. They've already closed the schools down, and in some places, maybe until June. I don't know that this governor is going to go along with what the president says.
Virginia closed down schools until next year. It's already a done deal.
Crazy.
It is.
Well,
insane.
And Governor DeSantis in Florida is now telling anybody that comes there and comes to Florida from New York or New Jersey has to self-isolate for 2 weeks in quarantine, or they're not going to be allowed in.
Well, okay, let's talk about that for just a moment. DeSantis also said, I'm not going to shut down the whole state just because down in Miami-Dade and Fort Lauderdale area, there's been a hot spot. So, I mean, I think that's the right approach. But when when New York City and New Jersey, they're shutting down everything there, and it is a hot spot, then we're going to check you out. Make sure you're not going to bring your New York stuff down here to Florida. I don't personally, under the circumstances, have a problem with that because that is, I feel like, a measured response because he wants to protect the rest of his state from getting infected with all that. I'm good with that.
I get that. And Sherry is saying it's dismaying to see how quickly people are embracing a nanny state. And it really is.
Yeah.
And I understand what the governor in Florida is doing because mostly, and I lived on the East Coast, I know this, most people in Florida travel down for vacation. New York travel down to vacation into Florida and, kind of and vice versa. People go back and forth between those two states a lot. It's very common.
Yeah, I lived in Florida for 10 years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So he knows what's coming.
Right. I mean, if they're scared up in New York, especially if they live in the city, I don't blame them for wanting to get away from it. Not at all. Right. But, I can't blame DeSantis for saying, okay, well, since you're coming from a hot spot, we're going to have to check you out. I don't blame him for that.
I don't blame him, but although I don't know it's constitutional for him to do that, I don't blame him. But again, it's another one of those things. How many more rights are we not going to be able to travel intra-state in our own country? It didn't keep Nancy from getting on a plane from San Francisco and flying into D.C.
I don't think Trump is going to just roll over and let something like that happen as far as, banning interstate travel. I mean, as we go into this thing, if it worsens, I don't know, maybe things like that have to happen. I am concerned about some of the things that are going on, but so far, and I'm sure there are probably a few exceptions here and there, but so far the stipulations that they're placing on people is across the board. In other words, right now they're not singling out churches and places of worship. They're not singling out this segment of society. But I also think that there are people who will use this as a dry run.
Yeah.
To see how far we can push things. In fact, if we can push things up really, up real far and tell everybody it's temporary, we'll back off. But I guarantee you there will be things left over. There will be residual things in place that when all this is said and done. And that's just the way it is in these days.
But I can see, like my point too was like, I can see not only interstate prohibitions, but I can start to see intrastate, that we're going to do the whole 9 yards of everything. And it kind of goes back to, well, I totally agree. And I've heard people say, stay out of Hawaii. We don't want you here, either. It's kind of like, you're hearing everybody say, well, we're in this together. Well, we're either in this together or we're not. But while I do understand it, I'm not so much concerned about that as I am about my Second and Fourth Amendment rights. Yeah. That really scares me beyond belief, and it should scare everybody.
Well, let's go back to something we were talking about earlier. Introspection. Where is my focus at? What am I more fearful of? Do I fear the things that man can do more than I fear God? If that's the case, then I need to adjust. I'm not saying it's wrong to be concerned about some of these things. I am. I'm very concerned about them. I'm very cautious about them, and I'm aware of them. And if they continue to trend the way they have been over the last couple of decades, then I have to make choices. I have to start making decisions. And that's where I'm going to need to make certain that I can hear the voice of God to get wisdom. Yes. And what's the next step I need to do, because I am adamant about this. It doesn't matter what men will do, and it doesn't matter what the Antichrist is going to do. God's still going to have people that are, following his voice, listening to his voice, that he is going to use in the midst of any and all circumstance. And, we have come into the kingdom for such a time as this. And just because this virus has kind of caught a lot of people off guard and unaware, it didn't catch God off guard. And it doesn't mean that now all of a sudden our purpose here has changed. It hasn't. It might actually be amplifying our purpose, and that we have to be steadfast in that we are the light, we are the salt, and that's how we have to behave.
Now, Paul has said, has anyone addressed the food supply issues in the U.S. on this broadcast? I think, one of the things too, I want to kind of briefly talk about, the good that's come out of all this. As we've seen people in their reactions to taking all the toilet paper, going in San Francisco and literally just loading up, it looked like taking drugs or NyQuil or whatever off the shelves and leaving, because we have a rule here or law in California, anything under $900, you're probably just going to get a smack on the hand. Nobody's going to do anything. And our food. I think this is for all of us looking at this, who many people were really prepared and well prepared, and they have gardens, and they could, they have an ability to have meat and all that at home, because they have animals that they raise for that, and all, on and on and on. I think it's taught us in the future, we need to be better prepared for things than we were. Yeah. I think it has brought people together, even though we're social distancing. It has, in a lot of respects, brought people together.
Look, in Proverbs, it says that the ant, and I'm paraphrasing, the ant has enough sense that while everything's growing in the summertime, to store up in the summertime, because he knows that winter is coming. He knows that there's going to be a season when there's not going to be as much readily available. But the reason the ant does this is because he wants to be able to continue being an ant. That is to function in his purpose. So where you and I as God's people are concerned, we should not think that this won't happen again. We shouldn't think that there won't be some other wave in the future that is going to come out of nowhere seemingly, and everybody's going to go back into panic mode, and this is going to be replayed. I don't think this is an end of the world scenario. I think this is a wave of many to come, and how fast, I don't know, but I do believe that. And so going back to what you said, so the lessons that we learn here, we don't need to soon forget. Yeah. The things that we're being prompted to do. And by the way, that is not to survive, that is to overcome. What we have to have certain basic needs in order to live our life and be the people that we're supposed to be. I don't want to be dependent on the government for anything. And I don't care if it's a Republican government, a Democratic government. I don't want to have to look to the government to get something to eat, get something to drink, have money to pay the bills. I don't want that. That's not a position that God's people need to be in if there's any way around it. So then, learn the lessons today, take steps to be in a situation where we don't have to be at the end of a bread line. We need to be at the head of the bread line, taking care of the people who are suffering. That's part of our mission, is to be his people.
And growing food for yourself means also being able to grow food to help other people, and so Elizabeth said, yes, praying for wisdom. Jonathan said, yes, we need the wisdom, strength, and courage to do the things we need to do and do them. And then Brenda Liz says, everything that's coming will catch us off guard, even the coming of Messiah to those who are not in the light. And I think that it has been a good learning experience. I like you, I hope we don't soon forget. We really kind of did forget quickly after 9/11. Yeah. But this should be a lesson to us that, we are in the end times. Other things like this are going to happen. They may be even worse, that's coming. And we have to prepare as best as we can, and then also put our trust in God.
Well, let me say this, and this is not to alarm or scare anybody, but the next one will be worse. because we're in birth pangs.
Right.
And that's just the way it works. The next one's a little worse, and the next one might be a little closer, and on and on and on, until this that's being birthed is brought into the world. And that is this age when the Messiah is ruling and reigning from Jerusalem, and we're ruling and reigning with him. That's what's going on here. So
it is.
It's in spite of all the things going on around us and the things that bother me and alarm me and even scare me sometimes, these are the things that the Messiah said that when we see them happen, we're not to look down, we're to look up, because our redemption's at hand.
Exactly. No, absolutely. And I think so, everybody check on people that make sure that they are okay, make sure that they have enough, and do the thing that you are really here to do, and that is to bring people to Christ so that they are not going to live eternally in hell. I mean that bottom line, in my mind, it's pretty simple. That's it. That's why we're here. So I don't know if you have anything that you want to say before we close.
Well, it's, the most important thing that any of us will ever learn in this life is, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever should believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And that is a truth that it was always true. It always has been true. It will continue on. And so God's concern, God's heart is people, even those kind of people that we don't like. That's where his heart is. And so that's what needs to be on our heart. And sometimes that means in loving people is being in a position to take care of their practical needs as well as their emotional and spiritual needs in times of crisis like this. So yes, check on those people that that might otherwise slip through the cracks. Check, make sure they're okay, make sure they're encouraged, make sure they're not sitting around in the dark in a fetal position, afraid to move. Shed some light in those situations, make sure they have what they need. These are the things that we can do.
And we can also pray for President Trump and the entire administration and our country, and those that are hurting and those that have the coronavirus. Pray for everybody. Pray without ceasing. And I think that it is a time to do that, and it should be automatic for us at this point.
Yeah, we do. We need to pray for the president, his family, the administration, those people who are loyal and faithful to help him in what he's trying to do. And that God would just give them strength, insight, and wisdom as how we go forward from here.
Absolutely. And Linda said the wedding feast is nigh. So on that note, everybody, thank you so much for coming. Stay safe. Please share this program with everyone so they can see it. And until next time, God bless you. Stay safe. We'll see you again then.